Good afternoon. I'm sorry that we're a little uncomfortable in here. We're certainly glad that so many of you are here. After working on a project like this for 4 years, you never know if anybody will actually show up. So it's an enormous relief and pleasure to see all of you here. My name is Richard Rabinowitz. I was the curator of the exhibition, The Revolution, and I'm joined here by my colleagues, Linda Kaplan, who is on my left, who worked with me to produce the video pieces and audio pieces that you see in the show, and also to actually collect these 300-odd objects that come from 73 repositories in 18 different countries. So that was Linda's enormous achievement. And Laurent Dubois, who's a professor of Caribbean Studies and Romance Languages at Duke University in North Carolina, who is one of the two senior scholars on our project, a very eminent professor, a very eminent historian of the Caribbean, who's written books on the Haitian Revolution, and they're available in the bookstore along with the catalog. And Jean Hébrard, who's crouching on here, who's a professor at the University of Michigan and is a historian of the Caribbean and of Brazil and of the history of slavery, and is responsible for the translations into French, both on the text panels. We don't have our Jean Casimir and Jacques Pierre, who are the translators into the Creole. I know many of you were using the Creole translations. It's one of my proudest parts about this exhibit, is that we were able to convince the Historical Society to do the exhibition in 3 languages, and all of the audio pieces are translated. Thank you. So I think many of you have seen the exhibit today or started to see the exhibit today. Can I just have a show of hands if that sort of seems to be the truth? Okay. I think given the size of the crowd and the number of you who have seen the show, I want to just say a couple of things about what our goals were, and then turn and ask Laurent and Jean to do that, and then just open the floor to questions, because I think there must be there seemed to be a lot of conversation going on in the gallery, and I wanted to give you the time to raise your questions on this day. This is a great moment for us. So when we started to do this exhibition, we thought that the biggest challenge was to try to frame the story of the 18th century age of revolutions not simply as a story of 3 different revolutions, but as a single continuous story in which the Haitian Revolution would be the culminating event, the culminating transformational event of this entire 50-year period. This was an unanticipated era in the history of the world. In 1763, it looked as though these imperial nations, Britain and France and Spain and Portugal and Denmark and Holland, had sort of fastened their hold on the Americas and on other parts of the world, and had a kind of hubris, a kind of ambition to be in control. But they didn't really contend with the kind of ferment that was emerging all through the Americas. One of our goals here was to see that this didn't simply happen in most of us who've studied this history have studied it in terms of American history or British history or French history or Haitian history. And actually, increasingly, we have to see that this history actually is a global history, and it's all part of it. And just by using, I think you can see there's so many places where there are translations in the exhibit. You see that every idea that was tossed about was thrown into the air and passed around from nation to nation, from person to person. Every ship that carried tools and people to the Americas carried ideas as well, back and forth, right? So that this was an important part of that. My job as a curator was to define the overall structure of the story with the help of our scholars and the help of many other people who are teachers and who had experience in trying to teach this. I went to Haiti and I spent about 10 or 12 days going around talking to people about how they would tell the story. They told a different story in Haiti from the story that I learned talking to American historians or French historians. French historians, frankly, I have to say, were not terribly interested in the story to a large extent. Laurent has just mentioned that when Jacques Chirac arrived in Port-au-Prince in 2004 for the bicentennial of the Haitian Republic, you want to just say what he...
So we have good relationships with Haiti, although they were never a colony of ours.
Right. He obviously needed... Did everybody hear that? We have good relationships with Haiti, but although they were never a colony of ours. In Haiti, I heard the story that he got off the plane and he said, "Why do all these people speak French?" And it's true that if you look at some of the great encyclopedias of the French Revolution, you can't even find Haiti or Saint-Domingue in the index. It's pretty astonishing. Anyway, I shouldn't really complain about that. That's going to change. We're going to take this exhibit, we hope, to France and to... So the task of the exhibition is to tell this story. Frankly, we knew that the story of the American Revolution and the story of the French Revolution the American Revolution has been often told story in this institution, and we wanted to tell it, but we knew we couldn't spend an enormous amount of time and space on it. The French Revolution is very complicated. We wanted to deal with the age of revolution, so that's why we spent so much energy on the development of the idea of emancipation, of the anti-slavery campaign. In a sense, this exhibition shows how all of these countries created the groundwork, both the ideas and the institutions and the practices to set in motion a revolutionary change which has not yet, of course, been accomplished, even in our time. That's really the story of this exhibition. So the American Revolution starts the ball rolling by creating the impetus for a revolt against colonialism. But it's very incomplete, of course, because it still retains and in some ways strengthens the institution of slavery in the United States, and that takes another, as Lincoln says, 77 years to be resolved. The British, in response to that, set in motion a revolt against the institution of slavery and the slave trade, and that is tremendously important in creating a kind of dynamic that actually makes slavery into something which is astonishingly, in 1763, there's almost no opposition to slavery. It's astonishing, except, of course, among the people who are being captured in Africa and carried across the ocean. And finally, that the Haitian Revolution is a kind of groping toward a way of creating a nation that is a totally new nation and which is devoted to emancipation and equality for all of its citizens. And it's a more thoroughgoing version of this revolutionary regime. I'm going to say one more thing about why an exhibit is important. Why do this in an exhibit? There have been wonderful video, film projects that tell this history. There are great books, histories, and some works of fiction that have told this story. In the exhibit, you see this as material objects. You see that these things are not just words. They actually were produced by people that took time to do it. To me, it asks you to stop. It asks you to ponder for a moment, to say, this letter, to me, the most important letter in the show is the most treasured object. I know there are great things in this exhibit, but to me, the most wonderful one is this letter that's written to one of the commissioners in 1794. Emancipation has been declared in Saint-Domingue, And this overseer on the plantation says, I'm sending you these 2 African women. They refuse to work in the mill at night, the sugar mill at night, right? They're emancipated, but they're not allowed to leave the plantation. And he says, they have said to the overseer, if you want to keep the sugar mill running, you're going to have to do it by yourself. Now, what's so amazing is that letter actually is one of the very few pieces of evidence we have for the voice of the African people in this story, right? So that to me was a great find. So what a museum exhibition does is it allows you to see history almost in slow motion, to see how things are constructed, how the arguments are made, how the physicality of the past is created. When you look at that figure of Jean-Baptiste Bellay, and you really try to understand, coming face to face with that man, what his life was like, born in Senegal, fighting against the French and then becoming part of the French Revolutionary Army and then going to Paris and being in Paris when abolition was declared. So I think what a museum exhibit does, it allows us to be a part of the very human process. You can almost feel the ink on those pages. So that to me is the great pleasure and excitement of this. And of course, we were able to, one of Laurent's students was in London in 2010, Julia Gaffield, and doing research, working through the papers of the governor of Jamaica, and she located the Haitian Declaration of Independence, the earliest printed copy of that document, and it's never been on exhibit. It's a great source of pride for us that the National Archives in London allowed us to be the first place where that's ever been shown. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Laurent, and he's going to say a few words, and maybe Jean will say a word or two, and then we'd love to just open up a conversation with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here. It's really moving to see so many people. As Richard told you, we've been working on this for many, many years and really hoped that this is what would happen, that this could be a place of conversation and discussion. When he recruited me to the project, he said, we're going to do an exhibit on the American and French and Haitian revolutions, but we're going to focus on the most important one, which is the Haitian. And so I said, sign me up. Yeah. So part of the challenge of the exhibit was, first of all, just getting people to change the way they think about the world, to understand the absolute centrality of the Caribbean in the 18th century, how important this region was economically, and we try to do that in the early parts of the exhibit. Understanding the kind of integrated nature of the Atlantic world, the way ideas spread, the idea of the common wind, which is an idea that a colleague of ours, a friend, Julius Scott, pioneered in the 1980s as a historian. The idea that communication, that communities of African descent, slaves, were communicating all the time and spreading news. And finally, of course, just foregrounding the Haitian Revolution as an incredibly radical and challenging revolution, one that raised, again, all these challenges that remain unfinished in many ways. So the challenge was partly to how to tell a story that's so unfamiliar to many people, we felt in the United States, where people will bring different knowledges to it. And in a way, this exhibit has to be thought of as just a beginning in some ways, right? To encourage people to rethink how they think of world history, to bring Haiti into their consciousness about the history of democracy and human rights, to begin to incorporate that and think differently about how we tell those stories. It can only be a beginning because the exhibit can really, I think, just prod people to go deeper in their exploration. We will be having an event in January, a symposium where I hope some of you will come back to, where we'll explore all these in more details as well. The other thing was the challenge in the exhibit really is to tell a story of revolution that honors its many kind of unknown participants, right? The many people who in some ways are not the people that are in the history books necessarily, or whose names are sometimes forgotten, to think about the kind of cultural and religious revolutions that went along with these deeper revolutions, the way that individuals who were in circumstances, extremely difficult circumstances, could nevertheless reinvent the way they thought of themselves and the world. And that, to me, is the great lesson of the Haitian Revolution, right? That people in the kind of worst of circumstances were nevertheless able to imagine and put into practice an extremely different universe and a different world. And in a sense, you know, no group in history has achieved what they did, which was to sort of to free the next at least five generations of those who followed, of their descendants. So putting those in front, and we also just really wanted to invite people into these texts, and we hope that people will read the Haitian Declaration of Independence. As Richard said, having this as a trilingual exhibit was extremely important to us. We're very grateful to all the institutions that loaned us these objects. The Giraudet painting of Jean-Baptiste Bellet, for instance, I myself had never seen because it's not usually displayed in France. So I encourage you to really look at that. It's one of the most remarkable images, I think, in modern history. So I'll end there. We're really excited to have your questions and to discuss more with you, and we'll hope you'll come to other events organized around the event as well. Let me just invite Jean Hébrard to say a few words as well. It's one of our...
Just a word, because it's time to go to see all that, you know. I just want to add something, which is when I visited the exhibition yesterday night, I said to Richard, you found something two things very strong. The first one is to offer us the possibility to read something that we know by heart, particularly us in France, the French Revolution, from the point of view of the Haitian Revolution. And that is completely new, and give to my revolution a completely different meaning, you know, and that's really strong. And the second thing is, like Laurent was saying just now, this common wind we're blowing everywhere in the Caribbean in this moment. I think that one of the most important place in the exhibition, in the path you will have in the exhibition, is a tavern. Just be very, very attentive in the tavern, because in the tavern is exactly the cafe, like we say in French. in the cafe, there is exactly the place where all that was just beginning to take a very important place in our history. And the tavern is a place of nobody or everybody, or the most important people in the revolution, the people who do the revolution. So have a good visit. Thank you.
So we'd be happy to entertain questions. And
First of all, I saw the exhibit with the African Americans, and I didn't understand why you didn't have Martin Luther King's photograph in that particular exhibit. Secondly, Napoleon, I may have missed it, but I didn't see very much about how the Haitians conquered Napoleon. So is that also? Oh.
Well, there's actually quite a lot. You need to go back and see the part about Napoleon. One of the most amazing things, one of the most amazing parts of the research was to go to the archives of the Ministry of Defense in Paris and find Napoleon's letter to Toussaint, which we have copied in here, and his letter to his brother-in-law, Leclerc, where he really talks about how I want you to go and master Napoleon's spirit. I want you to insinuate yourself into maîtriser son âme. There's a kind of bloodthirsty kind of fury in Napoleon, which is astonishing. And then we did trace the demise of this enormous colonial army, the largest expeditionary army that had ever been created. So there is a whole section of the exhibition. I have to ask you to go back. As far as the other exhibition is concerned, I really have to plead ignorance. It's not part of our work. The photographs of the civil rights era, is that what you're talking about? That wasn't part of our responsibility. So I can't answer that.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name's Rose Pierre-Louis. I'm the Manhattan Deputy Borough President, but I'm also a proud Haitian American. And I am delighted to be here with my colleague and friend Jacques-Philippe Pivaget, and we, who heads up and is the founder of the Global Syndicate, and we are delighted to be co-hosting with the New York Historical Society Haiti Day. And the response is clearly overwhelming, but I would rather be in a jam-packed room with you guys than anybody else in the world. I think this is a tremendous moment of pride for us as a community. As the Manhattan Deputy Borough President, I'm really happy that this exhibition is actually here in Manhattan because a lot of people champion Brooklyn and Queens as the delegation. But remember, we came here first. We came to the borough of Manhattan first. So I want to say thank you to Laura Washington, who is the Vice President for Communications here at the Historical Society, and also Jackie Adams, I know you're here as well, and to the members of the board of the Haitian Roundtable and of the Global Syndicate. I also want to introduce someone who is an honorary Haitian and is down for the cause, and that is our great council member from the Upper West Side, Gail Brewer. So we want to make sure that this exhibit is a slam dunk so that we can show New York City that we are an important constituency, that we are here in numbers. So for all of you that are in this room, I hope that you will tell people in the neighborhood to come to Manhattan, take the trek. I know there's a lot of traffic today with Batman being filmed and all that craziness. But it's worth the traffic to come see this, just to see our Declaration of Independence. It's worth the trip. So let's make sure that we support the Historical Society that has been so incredibly supportive, not only of the Haitian community, but of the Black diaspora. Thank you and enjoy the exhibit.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacques-Philippe Hivelger, as Deputy Manhattan Borough President mentioned. I'm the founder and chairman of the Global Syndicate, and there isn't much more to add given what's been said, but I really just want to thank everyone for coming, and I'm also happy to be here so I could wear my jacket. I wanted to do that. But we can't say enough about the New York Historical Society for putting this event together. As you know, it's an institution in New York City that is basically the first of its type in New York City, and for them to take the revolution's cause and make Haiti be so prominent in the entire exhibition speaks a lot to the values of the organization. We're proud to be part of this exhibit, especially special notice for Laura Washington, President Louise Mir, as well as Pam Schlafer and Jackie Adams. Jackie, I always joke with her that I follow her everywhere, and I couch it in a joke, but it really is not. She's a dear friend, a mentor of mine, and she introduced me to the New York Historical Society 2 years ago. And I can attest to you that a lot of work has been put into this. Richard and I have been in small meetings for the last 2 years as they really try to be thoughtful with respect to how to make sure that this exhibit touches all the communities in New York City in a meaningful way, and I think we owe them a round of applause for that. You know, the motto of Haiti is Union fait la force, and I think it's important to take a moment to think about what that means and the symbolism of that. And today, you know, the fact that two organizations that are run by Haitians are working together to bring, you know, this type of influence and color and just focus on this type of exhibit speaks volumes, and it's important. That's the only way that we're going to be able to build a community here in New York City. So the Haitian Roundtable, which, you know, I feel like I'm also a proud member of, and the work that it does here in New York City is just spectacular, and I encourage everyone to try to participate. This is one moment that we've come together, but there's a lot of work to be done within the Haitian community here in New York City, and make sure to follow up with Rose and other members of the HRT in order to be supportive. With respect to the organization that I run, the Global Syndicate, we're focused on international issues, specifically Haiti. We launched our Haiti project the year before the earthquake, because even before the earthquake, Haiti had a lot of issues. We specifically focus in the areas of education, economic development, and healthcare. I actually brought 25 people to Haiti just last month, October 13th to 17th, and 15 of them are actually here right now. And I encourage each and every one of you to reach out to us about ways that you can be supportive across the spectrum. So in Haiti, in New York City, understand the history, understand the impact that Haitians have had in New York City, in the US, in the world, and what it means for us as a people, and continuing to work together. With that, thank you very much to everybody, and enjoy the exhibit.
One of the amazing things about going to these meetings with Jacques Philippe and others is the sense of Haitians, the knowledge that people have of the history, and it's always it's interesting to me, and the richness of that commitment to understanding that past. So let me open it again. I know one more thing I want to ask is that we would love to have a number of you volunteer to have your reactions, your responses to the exhibition recorded on video at the conclusion of this program so that we can use that. And then I want to just push a little further on what Jacques Philippe was saying as far as involvement. We're obviously very interested in reaching out to schools and to social organizations and religious groups and lodges and so on. So we would love to get as much help as you can provide in making connections to schools and colleges. We're trying to encourage that as much as possible, obviously. That's an important, the education program here is very active. They're actually in the space where they greet and work with school groups. So let me ask if there are other questions that we can, yes.
I have the microphone. I wanted to ask a question. I've always thought about the three revolutions, the French, the American, and the Haitian Revolution, as very distinct. And this is just, and I'm not a historian, but from my knowledge of the French Revolution, I see it as, and also the American Revolution, I see them as being driven by the French, very much the philosophy and an idea of egalitarianism and human spirit. But the American Revolution I see as very much driven by economics and such. But without all that, I wanted to say that for me, the Haitian Revolution is the only one that speaks to the dignity of man. And ultimately, I think that is what the other revolutions were espousing, but also involved other ideas. But to me, when I think of slavery, and I think of the degradation of the soul and of the degradation of humanity, the fact that the Haitians were successful at bringing this demand for dignity and respect and acknowledgement of the human nature and the need to be free. So my question to all of you is, can you speak to each of the revolutions and your perception of what they espoused and what they brought to the world? Thank you.
Well, very simply, let me just say a word about the American Revolution. I think there is, of course, an economic dimension to the story. And the Americans created an argument for the notion that a government could be based entirely on the power of the people. And that is an empowering notion which liberated other people in the subsequent years. In other words, it's a tool. It was a very basic step forward that all governments really are ultimately responsible to their citizenry. That, of course, who their citizenry were in 1776 was a somewhat limited notion, right, as far as political participation. But the principle, I think, was really very fundamental, right? The idea of a structure of laws that is consistent and is rooted in a constitution is a very basic achievement. So these things are kind of stones that constructed ultimately, and all of these revolutions built on themselves. The French, of course, chose to issue a Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, which went further than in some ways than the American one did, but it was done because Lafayette and others thought of the American Revolution as a model. So in other words, these things are constructing on one another. And I think you're right. The Haitian Revolution argued for the dignity of all. Of course, the realization of that is still something that we all work for and aim for. So there is a linkage and a tie. That's why I think these are global. This was a global progression. And I think it's also important to say, if we had the time and the space, we would deal with the revolutions that followed in Latin America, which threw off the yoke of Spanish authority in the next 25 years. And now historians, believe it or not, are really interested in the revolutions that were occurring at the same moment in Africa and in South Asia and in East Asia and Java and so on. So we're beginning as historians. You know, when I was in graduate school, learning French was a big deal. Now, learning Creole has become an important thing. And then some of Laurent's students are studying various Congolese languages because one of his students actually is writing a thesis which portrays the revolutions as a Congolese revolution, as a revolution that stems from various African people. So this is an extraordinarily dynamic. It's very exciting to be a part of this intellectual process, and we want to share that with the widest public. Thank you.
Yeah, I won't add too much to that, but I do think that there's a progression, and also that I think there's some reason why the most radical claims came out of the Haitian experience, right? Out of that radical degradation. I mean, in other words, out of the extreme of the plantation and the degradation of slavery, you got very intense claims for universalism. And I mean, I would argue that that's really where true universalism gets articulated, because it's the first place that insists that under all circumstances people have to be given rights, you know, no excuses, kind of. So in that sense but at the same time, I think there's, you know, the Haitian Revolution happens in part through alliance with certain French abolitionists, with French radicals who take position with, you know, the alliances between people like Lavaux and Toussaint and so forth. So they are really linked, and I think in a way it's useful to think about the French and Haitian revolutions as very interlinked, and that helps us understand both in different ways. So.
Which is important, I think, it's to understand the double movement, which is the first one is the movement of decolonization. And you know, in Saint-Domingue, it could have done a decolonization. There was some colonies with the idea that to cut with France was a good solution, and so on. So, which is interesting is to see how, in the second revolution, which is a French one, this decolonization in the Caribbean zone is not sufficient at all. And that what you call, and I love the idea of dignity, fight for dignity, what you call fight for dignity, which did not happen in the first revolution, in the American one, arrived in this one. Why? Why? Because perhaps the concentration of the struggle in Saint-Domingue, end of 18th century, was so strong, you know, and the possibility of this very complex society where you had not only slaves, but what we call racistes and free people of color, which are very, very important place in the debate and the revendication for their own rights, you know. So it's really, with Saint-Domingue becoming Haiti, that something new arrived in the world, and that is very, very important for us.
So the tagline for this exhibit is, "Are you ready for the revolution?" Oh, I'm sorry. The tagline for this exhibit is, "Are you ready for the revolution?" And this young man that I want to acknowledge has started the revolution for Haitians in Nassau County, and I want to introduce to you the newly elected Nassau County legislator, Carrier Solage. Carrier, on Tuesday, became the first Haitian American elected to office in Nassau County in Long Island. So let's give it up for him. I think it's appropriate to say the revolution continues.
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been a tremendous experience. I'm sure that it's been a journey for all three of you and all of the parties involved. And what I'm hoping that you can do is to maybe share, maybe each one of you could share about something that you know now, that you've learned that you didn't know maybe 5 years or prior to doing the exhibit. Each one of you, if you can just share.
Well, you know, I think for me, the challenge is always to find a way in these exhibitions, in these programs that I do, to give voice to people who don't exist in large measure in the public record, or only they're enumerated perhaps. In this exhibition, you'll notice that there's an inventory of the slaves on one habitation. And the people, of course, only have one name. They don't have family names. They're not grouped by families. They're just listed, and their jobs are listed next to them. These were people who were instruments of production. As Laurent said, they had no capability for reproduction. They were not able to, you know, there were something like 900,000 slaves, Africans brought into the Saint-Domingue, and the population reached about 500,000. So it was really a killing field. The idea that in the historical record we could find evidences of their voice, of their action, that's really, for me, you know, sometimes I call it curating the silence. And frankly, it comes out of a sense that, you know, I come from people who also were silenced and had no opportunity to register themselves in the history. So my job as a historian is to recover and restore voice to those people. And that's a very challenging thing, because who controls the archive? Who controls what gets recorded, what gets preserved, where the records are? One of the saddest things about this story is that there are very few pieces of the archive of the Haitian Revolution in Haiti. To do research on this, we had to go to Paris and to Aix-en-Provence, where the colonial archives are. And it's very nice to go to Paris and to Aix-en-Provence. But it really, when I went to Port-au-Prince and I talked to the archivist, the national archivist in Port-au-Prince, it's sad that there isn't. So one of the parts of this project that I hope will happen is that Patrick Tardieu and others who are involved in collecting and preserving pieces of the history of Haiti can build these resources in Haiti itself, so that the Haitian children in the future will be able to tap into this. We are actually talking about a way to make a version of this exhibition that will go to Haiti and move through the countryside. So that, to me, has been, thank you.
I mean, I learned a huge amount from working on the exhibit, but probably a lot of it was just about what it means to put together how to make an exhibit. I really want to say that both Richard and Linda here are absolutely brilliant. I mean, they were really lucky to have these people put the exhibit together, because this is not simply a matter of taking, you know, some ideas and putting them on the page. It's about, he's cultivated something that I think is really an experience for people, a place to generate conversation and discussion. So I've certainly learned a lot they've discovered some wonderful new documents actually about the Haitian Revolution. There's a map in there that none of us had known about. The carcan that they have, the kind of the chains from the slave ship, that's something that also they've discovered. So they found a lot of stuff. It wasn't as if all this was there, but also just finding a way to present it in this way. And I think, so I'd like to just acknowledge them again, because I think that attention to detail makes the exhibit everything that it is.
I want to say that I discovered something very specific during these 5 years, because they were working, but I was working on another project on Haiti also during the same time. And what I discovered, it's the function and the fantastic, the amazing power of women during this time. And they were, some of them were slaves, of course. Others were owners of slaves. These women who were interested in us was women coming from Africa, born in Africa or descendant of African people, and they had not this voice that we hear in the archives. They are not present so much in the archives, but they have a fantastic function, and the function particularly to reinvent a world, and to organize this sort of reinvention of the mixing of America and Africa. And historian calls that creolization. It's a bad word, you know, but which is very interesting to see, and how this mixture is a product of the intelligence and the capacity to act and the willing more of women than of men. And you can see that when you look at the history of the end of Saint-Domingue and the beginning of Haiti. And that, for me, was a really good experience of this year. And in the catalog, you will find a paper that we write with my colleague Rebecca Scott, who was working a lot with me on that, on one of these characters, one of these fantastic women. Her name was Rosalie. She was arriving from Senegambia. She was a slave in Saint-Domingue, and she just traversed. She was to pass across the revolution, and by his voice, by his intelligence, we can understand in another way what was this revolution. So in the exhibit, just have a look on the women. There is a lot in the exhibit, and they are very, very interesting.
Maybe one more question, and then we'll allow you to go in. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Well, no, there is a whole pedagogical, like a little package of, a curriculum materials that were developed and that can be used. Absolutely. They would love to have groups come and.
April 15th.
Okay. Yes. Sorry.
I just want to congratulate you all on a marvelous work. Growing up in Haiti, I remember there used to be learning about the Haitian history, especially to Saint-Domingue when he was captivated, and there was a phrase that he said, and I wish you had mentioned it. I didn't see it, and if you did, I'm sorry. But the saying was, he said in French, on a battu la lampe de liberté. It was a small poster. Did you see it? Yes.
Yeah, it's in there. Yeah. Great. It looks like there's two more. Do you want to quickly ask one last question?
Quick question, just to build upon the earlier. Someone had mentioned earlier something about dignity of men being a constant theme throughout the exhibit. Why was it so important to the people in the revolution to be identified by France and other superpowers of that time?
Mm-hmm. Why was it so important for them?
Yes. Well, after,
Right.
They gained their independence. Why was it so important for them?
Well, that's in some ways, I think you can keep saying this, right? The Haitian Revolution in some ways was unfinished for a long time. And the power, because Haiti changed, the rest of the world didn't change. Slavery was still dominant. So there was a question of power, of economics, and that's a whole other story to tell that in the 19th century of why that was necessary. And it's another whole story to tell about what happens to Haiti actually afterwards, obviously. But I think they made a really big step towards changing the world, but obviously there were so many other forces that were still in place that they had to negotiate with, I guess.
But who was responsible for that? Because from what I've heard, from what my father told me, Haiti had to pay somewhere in the upwards of $90 million. Just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, well, the short answer is Boyer, who was the president who signed a deal with France for recognition. President Boyer, who was in. We could obviously discuss that. I wrote a book that's coming out next year that talks about that 19th and 20th century history. I don't mean to plug it too much, because that's a story in and of itself about what's happened in Haiti and between different social groups. I mean, the quick way I would say it is that since the revolution, there has been lots of conflict within Haiti over what freedom should really mean. And different people have defined it different ways, and that conflict has continued. So the revolution started a process, but that has continued. So, yeah.
I have a quick question for you. How many scholars of Haiti have you consulted in this project? 25?
25 scholars in total. I mean, among those, you mean specialists on Haiti in particular, or Haitian?
Haitian scholars.
We consulted, I'm trying to think what the number is of Haitian. Jean, I mean, a fair number, you know, yes, yeah. Rachel Beauvoir, Dominique, Jean Casimir they were on the scholars committee itself, but then a broader group, a lot of people were talked to over.
And I conducted meetings in Haiti.
Okay. I missed your first part, so I just want to make sure you consulted the experts.
Oh, yeah,
as well.
absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's remarkable how your exhibition contains the original documents for Haiti's Declaration of Independence. I was wondering, is this still the property of the Haitian government, or no? Is that funny? And what is going to be done? Because I think it's important. I think it's I think it's an important part of Haitians, government and history, and that it should be a part of their government.
You want me to answer that?
Well, let me just say, the question is, shouldn't the Haitian Declaration of Independence be in the possession of Haiti? The British, I don't want to speak for the British, but if you're Greek and you've been pressing for the return of the Elgin marbles, it's a challenge to get the British to give this back. So I don't know if that has even been proposed formally, but it certainly would be it would be an interesting question to come up.
I mean, I'll just say there are still so much to discover about Haitian history. There are family papers and archives in Haiti. There are things in the archives in Haiti. I think that hopefully the more people do work on this, we'll find more and more documents. But on that particular question, you'll have to talk to the British government, I think. Yeah. So maybe
yeah, we're going to close, and I want to thank all of you. Before we go to... I want to invite you, obviously, to come back and see the exhibition, spend some more time, come and bring your groups. We also have, just 1 second, please. The Historical Society has Frederick Douglass Council. If you look on the 77th Street side of this, the man who towers over 19th century African American and really American history is Frederick Douglass, and we have a wonderful statue of Frederick Douglass outside, and we've established a Frederick Douglass Council to support the activities that pay special attention. So you can join the Frederick Douglass Council and have unlimited admission to the Historical Society, and really be one of those people who invest in our efforts to interpret the struggle for dignity and the struggle for liberty and equality in the world. So I hope that some of you will take this opportunity to become part of this conversation. Obviously, the Haitian community is politically savvy enough to know that the more actively involved you are in an organization like this, the more its future curriculum, in a sense, its curriculum, its direction can be shaped. So we would love to have your support for educational and interpretive works like this through something like the Frederick Douglass Council. Do you want to say something else?
Hi, I'm Laura Washington. If you are interested in the Frederick Douglass Council, please see me. And also, we are taping in this room. We want your responses to Revolution. So we have releases. We'd love to get your responses. It'll be a very brief taping. Thank you. Thank you for coming.